Parents often think trust is broken by the lie they catch. Teenagers know it is usually broken earlier, by the conditions that made lying feel cheaper than telling the truth. That distinction changes everything. If you focus only on the moment of deception, you will ask the wrong question. How do I get more compliance, more access, more transparency, more control? But if you look at the relationship underneath the deception, the question becomes much more difficult and much more useful. What has my teenager learned about the emotional cost of being honest with me? Adolescence is a period of enormous internal risk. Shame is sharper. Identity is under construction. Social life can feel existential. Privacy becomes psychologically necessary. In that environment, teenagers are constantly deciding where truth is safe enough to place. If home begins to feel like a place where truth is punished, exposed, overinterpreted, or used to tighten control, they do not stop having an inner life. They simply relocate it. One of the mistakes adults make is assuming that trust is the same thing as openness. It is not. A teenager may be naturally private, moody, non-linear, awkward, contradictory, and still profoundly trust a parent. Trust does not mean giving a live feed of the self. It means believing that when something important, painful, or dangerous must be brought home, the parent will be emotionally survivable. Not perfect, survivable. They will not make the child regret telling the truth more than the original problem. That is an extraordinarily high bar, and many loving parents miss it without realizing how. They think they are reacting to the content. The teenager is learning from the process. How loud did you get? How fast did you moralize? Did you ask what happened before deciding what it meant? Did you make my fear about your image, your anxiety, your disappointment, your need to regain control? Those details determine whether home remains a refuge or becomes a jurisdiction. The first major trust killer is parental overreaction. Not because teenagers are fragile flowers who cannot handle consequences, but because overreaction teaches them that your nervous system cannot hold their reality without exploding or collapsing. They tell you they failed a test, and suddenly the conversation becomes a referendum on their future. They admit to drinking at a party, and your face announces catastrophe before you have even learned what happened. They confess that they have been feeling depressed, and within minutes, your panic has made them responsible for managing your fear. Teenagers can survive anger. What they struggle to survive is becoming the emotional caretaker of the adult they were trying to confide in. Once that happens a few times, the internal equation shifts. Better to handle this alone. Better to minimize. Better to tell half the truth. Better to wait until the evidence is undeniable and then deal with the fallout. A second trust killer is interrogation masquerading as communication. Some parents ask questions not to understand, but to corner. The tone changes, the pacing quickens, the teen starts answering and is cut off by the next question before the first one has landed. Who was there? Why didn't you tell me? What else aren't you saying? What really happened? Are you sure? And then the teenager does what almost any human under interrogation does. They become less coherent, more defensive, more selective, less honest. The parent misreads that as proof of guilt. In reality, it is often proof that the conversation has stopped being relational and started being prosecutorial. Teenagers do need accountability, but accountability without emotional oxygen produces concealment, not maturity. A question can invite truth or crush it. Teenagers know the difference almost immediately. Then there is the problem of ownership. Many parents subtly act as if a teenager's developing mind and life are family property. The child's private thoughts, messages, friendships, body changes, romantic curiosities, fears, mistakes, and experiments are treated as material to which the parent is naturally entitled. But adolescence exists partly to renegotiate ownership. The young person is supposed to acquire more psychological territory. When parents respond to that developmental need by increasing entitlement, the teenager often reacts with secrecy. Not necessarily because they are doing dangerous things, but because privacy becomes the only available symbol of selfhood. This is why constant monitoring can be so destructive. Even when it reveals information, it often destroys the conditions under which truth would have been offered voluntarily. Parents also lose trust by making honesty feel retroactively foolish. The teen tells the truth on Monday, and for the next 2 weeks that truth becomes the organizing reference point of family life. It comes up at dinner, in reminders, in side comments, in tone shifts, in extra restrictions, in suspicious glances, in subtle revocations of dignity. The teenager realizes that one act of honesty did not lead to resolution. It led to a surveillance afterlife. That lesson is unforgettable. A child can learn in 1 week that transparency does not simplify life. It extends punishment. After that, many become highly strategic. They disclose only what is already discoverable. They give the version least likely to create long-tail consequences. They become editors of themselves. Another quiet destroyer of trust is parental contempt for teenage subjectivity. Adolescents care intensely about things adults often find silly, overblown, embarrassing, or melodramatic. A text left unread, a friend group fracture, a rumor, a body insecurity, a slight from a coach, a humiliating hallway moment, a crush, an online comment. Parents who mock the scale of these experiences teach their teenagers that emotional truth must be translated into adult-approved seriousness before it deserves respect. Most teens do not have the language or confidence to do that, so they stop trying. They reserve their real feelings for peers or online spaces where intensity is not instantly treated as ridiculous. It is fashionable to complain that teenagers trust the internet more than parents. Sometimes the simpler explanation is that the internet, for all its dangers, did not roll its eyes at their first sentence. There is also a special kind of damage caused by parents who cannot keep relationship and control separate. Every conversation becomes strategic. If the teen reveals uncertainty, the parent increases oversight. If the teen reveals attraction, the parent increases restriction. If the teen reveals distress, the parent assumes unilateral management rights over the inner life they just learned about. In that system, honesty becomes self-endangerment. The teen is not merely revealing information. They are handing the parent new tools with which to manage them. Why would they do that voluntarily? This is why many teenagers keep the most important truths hidden until crisis. They do not trust the parent's capacity to know something without immediately converting knowledge into domination. It helps to understand that trust is built less by permissiveness than by proportion. Teenagers need adults who can respond proportionally, who can distinguish between a bad judgment and a collapsing character, between experimentation and emergency, between privacy and danger, between disrespect and developmental friction, between "I need to know more" and "I need to know everything right now." Proportion is a form of wisdom, and teenagers can feel it. It tells them the parent is not reading every event through panic. It tells them the adult has enough internal stability to remain useful. Without proportion, authority feels arbitrary and volatile. With proportion, even hard limits can preserve trust. This is why the best trust-building questions are often surprisingly modest. What felt hard about telling me? What were you afraid I would do? Is there a part of this story you still don't feel safe saying? What do you need from me first? Understanding, problem solving, or help making a plan? Questions like these do not surrender parental role. They simply signal that the relationship values truth more than domination. Teenagers often become dramatically more honest when they sense that the first goal is understanding, not courtroom victory. They still resist, they still omit, they still protect themselves. But the channel remains alive. Repair with a teenager is also different from repair with a younger child because the adolescent remembers pattern, not just incident. A single apology will not override years of overreaction or surveillance. What repairs trust is repeated emotional predictability. The teen tells you something difficult, and this time you do not explode. You ask before checking. You keep private what can stay private. You stop using their disclosures as cautionary tales for other family members. You do not convert every hard conversation into a referendum on gratitude. Slowly, the teenager begins testing the new climate. Small truths first, then slightly larger ones. Not because they believe you are perfect now, but because they are searching for evidence that honesty no longer carries the same price. There is an important sentence many parents need to say sooner than they think. I want to be easier to tell the truth to. That sentence changes the posture of the room. It admits that trust is not only the teenager's job to provide, it is the parent's job to deserve. Some adults resist this because they hear it as surrendering authority. It is the opposite. It is assuming responsibility for the relational conditions under which authority operates. The parent who can say that is often the parent who keeps influence longer, because teenagers are much more willing to be guided by someone who is self-reflective than by someone who merely insists on rank. If you are worried that your teenager no longer trusts you, look for the subtle signs before you look for the dramatic ones. Do they tell you about the embarrassing parts of life, or only the reportable facts? Do they ask for help before a problem is public, or only after it is undeniable? Do they answer your questions, or volunteer their own questions? Do they come to you to be known, or only to satisfy the administrative demands of the household? These are better indicators than obedience. A compliant teenager may trust you very little. A teenager who argues openly may still trust you a great deal. The real issue is whether the relationship can metabolize truth without turning it into humiliation or control. And if this reframed trust for you, subscribe. This channel is for people who want to understand family relationships at the level where long-term influence is actually won or lost. And send this video to one person close to you, someone with whom you want to build healthier, more intelligent relationships with the children you both care about. Few gifts matter more to a teenager than an adult who makes honesty safer than hiding. Because most teenagers do not stop trusting their parents out of rebellion alone. They stop trusting them when the relationship repeatedly teaches that truth will be overused, overshared, overpunished, or overcontrolled. Change that lesson, and the surprising amount of honesty returns. Not all at once, not in the old, childlike form, but in the more mature form that matters most. A young person who is becoming themselves and still believes home is a place where reality can be told. It also helps to notice where parents accidentally confuse access with love. They say, "If you trusted me, you'd tell me everything." But that is not how development works. A trusting teenager still needs places inside themselves that are not under constant parental lighting. In fact, the parent who can tolerate some mystery without escalating is often the parent who receives more truth over time. Desperation for total access feels unsafe. It tells the teen that the parent cannot emotionally survive ordinary separateness. Then the teenager begins protecting the parent from reality, or protecting reality from the parent. Neither outcome is intimacy. Another common rupture happens when parents demand honesty they themselves do not model. They ask their teenagers to be transparent, while refusing to admit when they overreact, invade, shame, or misread. This asymmetry breeds contempt. Teenagers may not phrase it elegantly, but they feel the hypocrisy. You want the truth from me, but you do not tell the truth about yourself. You want accountability from me, but you reserve complexity for your own mistakes. A parent who can say, "I handled that badly," restores moral credibility in a way rules alone never can. Moral credibility is one of the strongest forms of trust capital a parent can possess, and it is built through humility as much as through consistency. There is, finally, a long game here. The immediate goal in parenting is often safety and functioning, but the deeper goal is that your child will keep some form of honest relationship with you after you no longer control very much. That future relationship is being negotiated now. Teenagers remember who could hold hard truth without making it all about themselves. They remember who turned every confession into a spectacle. They remember whether coming home with reality felt like relief or like sentencing. The parents who remain influential in adult life are often not the ones who knew the most. They are the ones who made reality tellable. That is the heart of trust. So before your next reaction, imagine the invisible audience inside your teenager's mind. It is not asking, "Will I get away with this?" nearly as often as parents fear. More often, it is asking, "What happens to me with you when I am not at my best? What happens if I say the difficult thing before I have cleaned it up? What happens if I let you see me unfinished?" If the answers are over time becoming safer, trust is growing. If the answers are becoming more expensive, trust is leaving, even if the house still looks orderly on the outside. Authority matters. Boundaries matter. Consequences matter. But none of them can substitute for relational safety. Without that safety, rules become theater, and honesty becomes a tactical error. With it, even difficult limits can coexist with closeness. That balance is hard, adult work. It asks the parent to be both firm and non-fragile, informed and non-invasive, serious and not humiliating. But that is exactly the kind of strength adolescence needs. And when parents can offer that kind of strength, teenagers do not become perfectly transparent. They become something far more valuable, increasingly willing to tell the truth before concealment hardens into character and distance hardens into habit. That willingness is the relationship. Still,